Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
This coming Wednesday will mark the 50th anniversary since the famed March on Washington, when Martin Luther King Jr. stood up before America and described the dream he had for our future. Martin Luther King Jr. was an extraordinary man in his own right for many reasons. The titles that he's given are also interesting. More often than not today, we hear him referred to as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In the days when he was leading the fight, he was more often described as Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. The truth is he had earned both titles. He was an ordained minister, and he had earned a PhD from Boston University, and was no slouch in either regard, actually. The preacher in him never really went away, even when the academic in him came out. And when the political leader came out, it came out with a tinge of the religious leader. And so on this, the 50th anniversary of that famous speech, I want to spend a little time today looking at a piece of that speech. And as we do so, I'm going to quiz you a little bit. So we're going to turn to page 4, and we're going to pick up the second to the last paragraph, and we'll read together through the end. And what I want you to see if you can figure out is what piece of this speech comes from the Torah portion that we read this Shabbat. There is a piece in here. After all, King the preacher knew the Bible pretty well. There is a piece that comes almost directly, not literally, but almost directly from this week's Torah portion. I want to see if anybody can catch it, and then afterwards we'll talk about it and see what we can find. So we'll join together on page 4 towards the bottom. Everybody should have received a copy when they entered the chapel this evening. I say to you today, my friends, even though we face difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream. I have a dream that one day in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, "My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. When we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every city and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jew and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, great God Almighty, we are free at last. What's the section from the Torah portion this week? Anybody catch it?
Every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low.
But isn't that from Isaiah?
A valiant guess, but Bruce is right. It's from Bible, but it's not from. It's part of it. It's actually a blur. Pieces of it are from Psalms, and pieces of it are from Isaiah. King very deftly pulls the two together. They come straight from Tanakh, from Bible, but they are not from the Torah portion this week. Anybody else pick it up? It was there. You all read it. I heard you. Every one of you said it. Nobody got it?
Free at last?
Free at last is, I wish we could claim credit for that. We can't. It's not ours. I don't know the history of that phrase, but that's not from Torah.
Is it the paragraph, continue to work with the faith, that unearned suffering, that, the Torah is accessible and for everyone?
A valiant effort. A valiant effort, but no. That idea comes up, not in this week's Torah portion.
Oh.
There's this notion that we have to keep working, that unearned suffering is redemptive. That piece comes up, but it's not in the Torah portion this week. Anybody else want to take a swing at it? Go for it.
Okay.
Just for the record, I didn't prep her on this at all. She had no idea what I'm saying tonight. She will tell you. In the car on the way over here, she said, "Do you know what you're saying?" And I said, "I'm not sure yet."
Okay, so I have it.
I actually did know, but
That this nation will rise up living out the truth meaning of its creed. So words would be same as in the Torah.
yes and no. The true meaning of its creed is language that appears in our liturgy, in our prayers, for sure. I'm not sure it appears in Torah. But it's certainly, that language is language we use in prayer. And look, this is king who grew up in church. This is the king who was a minister, who understood this, and understood the power of those words, and knew what those words would do when he said them on a political stage as opposed to on a church pulpit. There's an emotional power when you take church and move it into the public sphere. Not always for the good. I mean, we can all think of instances where people have taken church into the public sphere and it hasn't been so good. But there's an emotional thing that happens there. The piece you're noting is exactly one of those, where it can roll off your mouth with relative ease, and you don't realize what you're saying, but subconsciously it's triggering something in you because you know that phrase, having heard it in church or in synagogue, wherever you were. William.
No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
Again, a wonderful phrase, but not from this week's Torah portion. Where's justice roll down like waters and righteousness from a mighty stream? Anybody know where that one's from? Come on, Gould, you got to know this one.
I know it, but I can't.
All right, so that's your assignment for next week. Tell me where that comes from. I can be cruel sometimes.
So I'll take
Sally.
that hewing out of the mountain of despair, stone the Pope.
Isaiah.
Isaiah.
Isaiah has a little bit of that, and our Christian friends take that as a wink and a nod towards the role that Jesus plays in their theology.
And that's the inspiration for the monument in Washington.
Yeah, it's carved actually into the monument there. Yeah, and he's coming forward. I mean, the visual is him moving forward out of these stones. It's not that. Good guess, though. Barbara.
And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together.
That verse appears in Torah all over the place, but not this week. Also a good guess. Look how much Torah he has worked into this thing. You got to note that it takes skill to do that. That doesn't just happen. Stephanie.
I have two possibilities, and I will be honest, I don't know. With this faith, we will be able to work together,
Nope.
or this will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning.
I would love to have the second. Actually, I'd love to have either of them be in Torah, but neither of them are in Torah.
I'm stunned.
Christopher.
Sitting down together at the table of brotherhood?
Nope.
We're running out of stuff. Right?
You haven't hit it. Christopher.
I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your questions for freedom left you, battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been veterans of creative suffering.
Sounds close, but no. There are pieces of the phrasing there again that ring true to pieces of liturgy that we use, but that's not from Torah. Eric, you're about to say.
Yeah, I don't think it's from this Torah portion, but there is a quote that I've heard from this 94-year-old African-American woman who was at the health center about rough places will be made plain and crooked places will be made straight. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's right out of the Bible.
It does, but it doesn't come out of the Torah portion this
But
week.
that's what I'm thinking, because this week I just finished reading the Torah portion, and it's all about curses and blessings.
You're right.
And so I'm trying to look in here and say, what could be that? Where it talks about dividing people to stand on mountains where the curses would be said, and where the blessings would be said.
I'll give you a hint. It's on page 6.
Let freedom ring.
Nope.
Just jump.
I'm telling you, it's one. As soon as I say it, you'll say, Rabbi, you're stretching a little bit. But then when you go back and look at the Torah, you'll say, by God, you got it right. Maybe not by God, but you'll say. It's in the first full paragraph.
Every hill and molehill?
Nope.
Every mountainside,
Nope.
but not only that,
Nope.
let freedom ring.
Nope.
Stone Mountain.
You want to know what it is?
Yes. Yeah. Ellipsis.
No. Although there are more than a few of those. That's a good guess, too.
Every brother and sister will sit down with chicken soup.
The Torah does a wonderful job of coupling. And our tradition does the same thing of coupling, of putting two things together. And there are lots of times when this comes together and this happens. The most famous coupling is one that never appears together. I shouldn't say it appears together in liturgy, but not in the Torah, which is when we talk about Mount Sinai and Mount Zion. Mount Sinai, of course, is the mountain in the Sinai Peninsula where Torah was given. Mount Zion is the mountain in Jerusalem that is near the Old City. You know exactly where it was because you stayed there. There's some argument of whether that Mount Zion and Mount Moriah are the same mountain or not. Mount Moriah is the mountain that is said to be where the temple is built, and it's the mountain that was said to have been the place where Abraham attempted to sacrifice Isaac. In our tradition, in Muslim faith, it's where Abraham attempted to sacrifice Ishmael. So Sinai and Zion is this coupling that comes through. The Torah portion this week, the Israelites are on the east side of the Jordan River. They're about to come in, and they're given these instructions about blessings and curses. And then the people are divided based on their parentage. The children of the tribes who are the children of Leah and Rachel are sent to do blessings on one mountain. And the children of the midwives, the handmaidens, not the midwives, but the handmaidens, the concubines, are sent to do the curses on another mountain. The two mountains are Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. And the tradition sets up so that when we go into the land, we set up these two opposing mountains of blessing and curse. These two mountains that are symbolic of what we're going to be as a people. King, in this paragraph, from Stone Mountain of Georgia and Lookout Mountain of Tennessee, he does the same thing. He sets up two mountains and says it isn't good enough that you do one. You've got to do both. The situation in Tennessee was not the same as it was in Georgia. Stone Mountain in Georgia had much more negative history associated with it than Lookout Mountain in Tennessee did. Not that Tennessee was such blessing, but comparatively, Lookout Mountain in Tennessee was the blessing and Stone Mountain was the curse. King understood this. He understood it very well. And so he sets up that little phrase that all of us rolled right by. Did anybody even think about those two mountains as the spot?
Well, the question you asked
were
was,
significant.
what phrase comes right from the Torah?
Right.
And like I went right by it because Georgia and Tennessee are not
In the Torah.
Torah.
Right.
So
But the notion of setting the two mountains in opposition to each other. Now, those aren't the only two mountains in the South. They're the two most well-known, but they're not the only two mountains in the South. And he talked about the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. He could have drawn a parallel to the old Stone-Faced Mountain in New Hampshire that fell down a few years ago. I forget the name of it. The Old Man on the Mountain, exactly. Or he could have done it to Pikes Peak. I mean, he could have played with mountain metaphors in a lot of different ways. He didn't. He did it this way, and this way mimics the way the Torah portion sets up Ebal and Gerizim to a T. It absolutely, Ebal and Gerizim are these two mountains that are both, as you first enter the land, they are in geographic proximity, just as Lookout Mountain and Stone Mountain are. I mean, there are plenty of other mountains that King could have chosen, but he chose two that were in proximity to each other. They are set up to do this blessing and curse thing, where one has this more negative attachment than the other one does. Same with Stone Mountain compared to Lookout Mountain. They are set up in a way that the Israelites make their stand there, but then go much further into the country and change the whole world. And that's what King is doing here too. Lookout Mountain and Stone Mountain are symbolic of the change King wants to make. It isn't enough to just do Lookout Mountain and Stone Mountain. It's got to bounce off of the cliffs of those two walls and reverberate into the valleys of America and change the whole country. And so it is, you're right, Lookout Mountain and Stone Mountain don't appear in Torah. But the concept, the thought that underlies what our Torah portion says is precisely what King picked up in this. Now, how do you find it? Well, you start by reading this thing through because you get an email saying it's the 50th anniversary, and you think, I should go look at it. Maybe we'll figure out a way to use it in the service this week. Having already looked through the Torah portion a couple of times, and then all of a sudden it kicks in your head. Gee, King did something interesting here. I wonder how he figured that out. At least that's how I got to it. But we roll these things off of our mouths, off of our tongues, in national discourse without thinking about it. And catching the origins of our own tradition in some of these bigger picture things is really not only important, but it's exquisite. There's an absolute beauty in recognizing how our tradition plays out on a grander scale and in different contexts throughout the eras, throughout the ages. And so I'm fairly sure that most of us, when we look at Martin Luther King's speech, don't think of Torah. But I hope that you caught at least a little bit that there's a lot of Torah in here. And I'm pretty sure that when most of us read Torah, we don't think of Martin Luther King. But Torah by itself, as we studied in the Pirkei Avot class this last week, if you just study and don't bring it into everyday life, is useless. Our tradition is one that says you study in order to do, not study in order to study. And so we take the Torah portion and we take King's words and we use both of them as fuel to make the world that we want to have, not just for ourselves, but for our children and our grandchildren. And as we approach Rosh Hashanah in a couple of weeks, a week and a half, that's the task in front of us. It isn't to look backwards and see where we've been. It's to say, okay, what do we want to create going forward? what do we want our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, what do we want their inheritance to look like? How do we want them to do based on what we believe? So that's our challenge. Find out who wrote "Let Justice Flow Like a and Rivers Like a Mighty Stream." That's the quiz for next week. Shabbat Shalom.